Hi, everybody. This is Attorney Gloria Allred, and I'm going to be commenting and answering some questions about the decision by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court today to overturn the conviction of Bill Cosby. This must be devastating to many of the accusers, and my heart especially goes out to those who bravely testified in both of his criminal cases. I did represent a majority of the prior bad act witnesses who testified in both of the criminal cases against Bill Cosby. And they were very brave. And despite the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision, I want everyone to know that I do believe that this was a very important fight for justice. And even though the court did overturn the conviction, it was on technical grounds. It did not vindicate Bill Cosby's conduct, and it should not be interpreted as a statement or a finding that he did not engage in the acts of which he has been accused. And I'll be very happy to take any questions. And in addition, I did have an opportunity to speak to one of my clients who testified in the second criminal case, Janice Baker Kinney, and she said she was stunned by the decision. She is still processing it, and she and I will be speaking out tomorrow. So I'll be happy to take any questions if you would like to type them in, and I will be happy to respond to them. The first question is, do I think Mr. Cosby is still a danger to women? I'm not going to answer that question directly, but I will say this. Even though it does not appear that there are any other criminal cases that could be filed or prosecuted anywhere on behalf of any accuser, at least any that I have represented, I do believe or do represent that a civil case can proceed. And as a matter of fact, I do represent a very brave woman who has filed a civil lawsuit, and we are litigating that lawsuit in LA County Superior Court. And the case is Judy Huff versus Bill Cosby. And in that case, our client alleges in the lawsuit that she was the victim of child sexual abuse by Mr. Cosby at the Playboy Mansion in Southern California. That case has been stayed because both opposing counsel for Mr. Cosby and my law firm have agreed to stay the civil case for trial until the decision came down from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which it did today. We will be having a status conference with the court in Santa Monica in August, and we will be informing the court officially of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision to overturn the conviction. And we do expect that a date will be set for any further discovery and for trial of our case very soon by the court. Since we are going to be trying a case, I want to also say that we're going to be doing more discovery, and that will include a deposition of Mr. Cosby. We did take his deposition previously, deposition being his testimony under oath in this civil case. That deposition remains under seal, and so we cannot discuss what he said or failed to say in that deposition. However, based on that first deposition that he provided, we returned to court and made a motion to compel him to take a second deposition. In other words, to appear to answer questions under oath again. Over his objection, the court granted our motion to compel a second deposition of Mr. Cosby. However, the court stayed the taking of his deposition until such time as his criminal case concluded, which it did today. So that now that we can proceed to take his deposition, at some point, we will be taking his testimony under oath. And because his criminal case is now concluded, and because he is not in jeopardy of being criminally prosecuted, he will not be able to invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination in our case. So he will be compelled to answer questions under oath in our case. That's a rather long answer to your question. Is he still a danger? But I think that's the best way for me to answer it. And the jury will decide if, as and when we get to trial in this case, what the jury believes based on the evidence in our case. So next question is, what does this mean? And this is for Michelle Kingston. What does this mean for accusers moving forward? I'm not sure if you're talking about accusers in the Bill Cosby case or accusers of Bill Cosby, or whether you are talking about just accusers in general. I'm going to just take the liberty of assuming that you mean accusers in general, accusers of rich, powerful, famous figures, and whether it might deter them, for example, from either filing police reports or filing lawsuits or both, or testifying in either criminal or civil cases or both. My opinion, based on my 46 years of practicing law, and as I've said, we are the leading women's rights law firm in the United States and have been for all that time, is that many, many victims will continue to have the courage to come forward and to file civil lawsuits against those who sexually assault or rape them or victimize them with child sexual abuse. They will file police reports. They will be willing to testify in many cases, both criminal and civil. And if they have support from victims' rights attorneys, from victims' advocates in the criminal justice system, they will know they're not alone, and they know that they have the power to help to win justice. I say that because I do represent many victims in pending criminal cases. I represent majority of victims in the R. Kelly case that is set for trial in August in the Eastern District of New York. I represent 2 victims in the Harvey Weinstein criminal case that in which Mr. Weinstein is set to be extradited very soon to Los Angeles for this criminal prosecution, which will take place here in Los Angeles, which is where I'm doing the Zoom right now. I believe that those witnesses and or victims who are set to testify will proceed despite this this result in Bill Cosby's criminal case, and well, they should, because it's just a technical legal decision, even though it is an important constitutional issue. And I don't call constitutional issues technical, but from a layperson's point of view, it's not a decision on the merits, is what I mean. So, no, we are going to continue to support them bravely. And I also represent a witness in the Cuba Gooding Jr. case, and I have every reason to believe she will proceed to testify as well, and on and on and on. So that's my hope. Of course, I've not had an opportunity to speak to all of my clients today, who are either victims or witnesses in criminal cases. Having said that, that's my educated guess, knowing them as I do, that they will not be deterred, and we will continue to fight on. So the next question is this decision a blow to the overall Me Too movement? Well, I've been doing the Me Too movement, so to speak, for 46 years. That's how long I've been bringing women to the justice system and helping to support them so that they can have their voice, so that they can be heard, both in the criminal and civil justice system and also even outside of the justice system. And so is this a blow to the Me Too movement? It's not a win, but it's certainly a moment in which we all understand that it's a long road to justice. And, you know, there are many roadblocks on the way. The justice system is not perfect. Laws are not perfect. Judges don't always make the right decisions. Prosecutors don't always make the right decisions. Lawyers don't always make the right decision. But because it's imperfect, that's not a reason to decide not to participate in it. We have to be brave. It takes all of us to win change. We have to not let fear paralyze us so that predators continue to prey on victims, hoping that they will be fearful that the system will not support them and therefore they shouldn't come forward. That would only give predators a license and an incentive to continue to prey on victims, and I don't think any of us want that. Okay, can Cosby ever be tried again, even under different charges, asks Emily Valdez from KNX. I don't see that happening, but on the other hand, I can't say that I know every person who's ever filed a criminal complaint against Mr. Cosby, and where they filed it, and if they did, whether they're still within the statute, and if so, what the evidence is, and who the district attorney is, and what the decision would be. So I really don't know. I think it's unlikely, but that's my view. The next question from Bloomberg News is Bob Van Voris. Can you explain why criminal prosecutions based on the allegations of other women are unlikely? I'm going to make a guess that what you're referring to is the testimony of other witnesses, so-called prior bad act witnesses in Pennsylvania. In New York, by the way, they're called Molyneux witnesses. We have similar type of law in California, which allows testimony of other witnesses depending on whether they fit certain legal criteria. Other witnesses did testify in the Harvey Weinstein case. I represented the main victim in the criminal case against Mr. Weinstein, in which he was convicted of criminal sexual assault against my client, Mimi Haley, and he was sentenced to 20 years. I also represented two other witnesses in that case who testified. So the issue, by the way, of whether other witnesses, so-called Me Too witnesses or prior bad act witnesses or Molyneux witnesses, will be allowed to testify in the future, I want to say is a very important issue. It's not an issue that was decided by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court today. Matter of fact, the court made clear that they don't need to reach that issue, or didn't need to reach that issue, because they decided this case of Mr. Cosby based on what they decided was a non-prosecution agreement, and that Mr. Cosby relied to his detriment on it and testified in the depositions in the civil case as a result. So I don't want anyone to misinterpret. I hope they don't. I saw some reporting that I think does misinterpret the issue having to do with other prior bad act witnesses. Even though the court in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision seemed to indicate that they felt that the testimony of prior bad act witnesses may have tainted the trial, they didn't, I mean, that's really dicta because they didn't decide the case based on that. And they were clear on that at the end of their opinion. So I do hope and expect other witnesses will come forward to testify, perhaps in the Harvey Weinstein criminal case in California, perhaps elsewhere. I don't know. I'm not privy to who all the people that the prosecution is intending to or going to ask the court to allow to testify in the criminal case in Los Angeles. That's for the prosecution to announce or decide. But I do think that under certain circumstances, it's important. Just, I will add finally to this, that the reason the prior bad act witnesses were allowed to testify in Pennsylvania in the criminal case of Mr. Cosby was to show what they call absence of mistake, to prove it. In other words, that Mr. Cosby could not have been mistaken about whether or not Ms. Constant consented to aggravated criminal sexual assault of her or indecent assault. He couldn't have been mistaken because he had a pattern of drugging and sexually assaulting women is the theory upon which that evidence was admitted. But I'll proceed. And so each case is different. Each case depends on the facts. It depends on the legal requirements to admit certain prior bad act or Me Too witness statements. And so I'm sure there are going to be many battles about that in the future. And no doubt Mr. Weinstein is raising that also on appeal. All right, so the next question is, did I find this to be an unfair trial? I didn't. Obviously, anyone who was convicted generally feels that the trial was unfair. I didn't feel that it was unfair. On the other hand, Pennsylvania Supreme Court obviously felt that Mr. Cosby's rights were violated for the reasons that they stated. Then next question from Robin is, given that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did not weigh in on guilt or innocence, but on technical grounds, will the overturned verdict have an effect on civil cases? Right now, the only civil case of which I'm aware is the case that I'm litigating in LA County Superior Court. Will it have an impact? Well, the answer is, in a way, yes, because, and I can only speak to our case, because now Mr. Cosby will not be able to, from a legal point of view, invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. I'm translating that to say, in plain English, he will be required to answer our questions under oath, and he will not be able to say, I'm taking the Fifth, I decline to answer based on my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. So that's actually beneficial to us, and that's why, as I say, I'm looking forward to taking his deposition and really getting all the answers that we seek. So that's actually a positive for us. Now, what's the difference? Next question from Phil Schuman. What do you think was the difference between the Supreme Court's ruling versus the lower courts looking at the same evidence and circumstances and upholding the verdict? You know, I really haven't had an opportunity to compare them all, so I don't feel that that's a question that I can answer, but obviously they have the last word. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court in Pennsylvania has the last word. Also, next question, let's see. What was my initial reaction, Kelly, to hearing that Cosby's conviction was overturned? It was really surprising. And as I say, Janice said she's still trying to process it. Janice Baker Kinney, my client, and that it was stunning to her. And I was concerned at oral argument when I heard the questions that the justices were asking. I didn't feel that it would bode well for the ultimate decision. But you can never know based on questions of justices or judges what the ultimate decision is going to be. But it is what it is. And, with courts, and in life, the only thing you can really expect is the unexpected. And this is what it is. We will deal with it. We will move on. It's always 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards in the women's movement. But the good news is we're moving forward. We're not going to be deterred. And let's take the next question. I think that's, I think I've answered most of them. Let's see.
Looks like that's it.
I'm just going to see. I think I've answered most of the questions. So how many Cosby accusers do I represent? How many are there in total? I did represent 33. That's how many. How many are there total? I don't know, because some other people represent some others, and I don't know. Some people are also unrepresented. And some of them, by the way, some of the accusers that I've represented have never disclosed what happened to them, except to me. In other words, they didn't disclose to law enforcement in Pennsylvania, although many did. And of course, Bill Cosby's defense team verbally beat up on me because I did connect and plead guilty to connecting many accusers of Mr. Cosby to law enforcement in Pennsylvania, which I thought really was my moral duty. And I think law enforcement then can make the decision as to, any weight that they think should be given to the accusations of any person who makes those accusations. But so I don't know how many there are, but I can tell you the full story in reference to allegations against Mr. Cosby has never been told. So let's see if there are any other questions, and then we will conclude. Okay, let's see. Okay, the question is, if there's only one civil lawsuit, will others be coming down the pike? I have no idea. I have no other idea whether anyone else intends to file a civil lawsuit, or if they do, whether they're within the statute of limitations to do so. Statute of limitations being that arbitrary time period set by law during which an accuser must file a lawsuit, or if she or he does not file it within the time period, they can file it, but then the defense will make, will make a motion to dismiss it. Statute of limitations is what we call an affirmative defense, and it will not be allowed to proceed if it is not within the time period set by law. I'm not going to begin to opine on what the time periods are, because they are different in every state. They're different for criminal cases. They're different for civil cases. The statute of limitations has been changing. I testified in 3 states, California, Colorado, and Nevada, and we were successful in either changing or eliminating the statute of limitations because many of my clients who were accusers of Mr. Cosby testified about the need to change or eliminate statute of limitations. How those changes will affect any future cases involving Mr. Cosby, I can't tell yet. It's complicated, and I just don't have an answer on any of that. But the point is, Mr. Cosby is not home free. I've not had an opportunity to see the press conference by Mr. Cosby's spokesperson or defense team. I just heard that somehow there was an allegation of political corruption in reference to his prosecution. That is one of the most absurd things I've ever heard. And I think it's just ridiculous. And let's see, if there's one last question, then we will conclude. I think that's it. I would say to all of the victims who are listening to me, whether it's a person who believes that they were victimized in some way by Mr. Cosby or victimized by any other person, even if the person was not rich, powerful, or famous, whether it's a person that you know, a father, a stepfather, a stranger, a rabbi, a priest, a minister, a teacher, a coach, or political figure, anyone else in your life who has victimized you, just keep up your courage and fight on. Failure is impossible. Thank you. This concludes the news conference.